Frankly, Professor, I don't see what strategic value America has anymore, a student declared from the front row. Without its global dominance, isn't the US finished? The words, spoken with a distinct Russian accent, hung in the air. A heavy silence instantly descended upon the lecture hall at Harvard University. Dmitry Volkov, an exchange student from Moscow, chuckled with a dismissive air. It's illogical. If America were truly that powerful, why has it been projecting an image of decline for so long? Professor Edwards fixed him with a piercing gaze, his expression unreadable but profound. Be careful with your laughter, Mr. Volkov, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. Your country might be the first to truly understand the cost of that miscalculation. Professor John Edwards was a titan in the field of international security strategy at Harvard, America's preeminent university. His lectures were legendary. As he was about to begin, a unique tension filled the room, where dozens of the world's brightest future strategists waited in anticipation. When the professor walked to the podium, the low murmur of conversation ceased immediately. Today, he began, we were scheduled to discuss the security architecture of the Eastern European theater, focusing on strategic buffer zones and their relationship with neighboring powers. Just as Professor Edwards was about to continue, Dmitry Volkov raised his hand. Professor, with all due respect, I don't see what strategic value America has anymore. It's a divided nation, its industry is hollowed out. Without its global dominance, isn't the US finished? The room went still. Mark Johnson, a fiercely patriotic student from Texas, felt his face flush with anger, but Professor Edwards said nothing. He simply walked slowly toward the large whiteboard. Professor, did I say something wrong? Dmitry pressed. Besides, America is a nation in decline, dependent on past glories, is it not? Professor Edwards remained silent. He picked up a black marker and wrote two large words on the board. Strategic miscalculation. Everyone, he announced, his voice calm yet commanding, resonating through the hall. Today's planned lecture is postponed. Instead, I want to address the single greatest error the international security community has been making for decades. He turned to face his class. Mr. Volkov, your comment happens to be the perfect introduction to today's revised topic. The professor walked to his laptop and connected it to the main projector. The students leaned forward, their attention now laser-focused. This lecture is changing, effective today. The new title is The American Miscalculation, the Strategic Colossus Hiding in Plain Sight. A murmur went through the room. Professor, a student named Sarah Miller asked, what do you mean by that? Professor Edwards paused for a moment, then slowly looked up at his students. All of you are the future of international security. But there is one nation that is poised to completely upend the global security landscape. A nation that, until now, has been fundamentally misread by the entire world. You mean the United States, sir? Mark asked. Precisely, Edwards confirmed. The information I am about to share with you today is not widely known. If, one day, any of you sitting here become movers and shakers on the world stage, remember this day. Today is the first time you will come face to face with the hidden identity of a nation you thought you knew. The students nodded in silence, a palpable tension in the air. On Dmitry's face, however, a look of clear skepticism remained. Let's begin, the professor said. First, I want you to forget everything you think you know about the United States, especially regarding its military strength, its defense industry, and its national security strategy. Professor Edwards clicked a file, and a document with a classified stamp appeared on the screen. Today, you will learn how the world has catastrophically underestimated the true power of one nation, and how that mistake will shape the future of the international order. He stared at the screen for a moment, then turned back to the students, his face etched with a gravity they had never seen before. Ladies and gentlemen, the information I am about to disclose is extremely sensitive. It could very well jeopardize my career, and perhaps even my life. A quiet gasp rippled through the classroom. Professor Edwards clicked his laptop again. Soon, a voice, speaking English with a heavy Russian accent, filled the room. My name is Ivan Morozov. Was a colonel in the GRU, Russian military intelligence. If this file is ever released, I will be in mortal danger. But the world must know the truth. The voice trembled slightly, heavy with exhaustion yet filled with an unshakable resolve. America is not the America we know. All our assessments of its military capabilities are completely wrong. If necessary, The United States could deploy a new generation of strategic, paradigm-shifting weaponry within 6 months. We have miscalculated on a colossal scale. Dmitry Volkov scoffed loudly. This is absurd. If America is so powerful, why would it hide its strength for so long? Professor Edwards looked at him sharply. Don't be so quick to laugh, Mr. Volkov. Your country might be the first to suffer the consequences. The recording continued. America's defense industry is nothing like it appears on the surface. They only show us what they want us to see. Their true capabilities are at least 10 to 15 years ahead of what is publicly known. Sarah's eyes widened. Professor, is this real? If it's an assessment from Russian intelligence, we must assume it's credible, Edwards replied. I acquired this recording 8 months ago through a personal network. Mark leaned forward. But why would the US hide these capabilities? They could be used as a powerful deterrent. An excellent question, the professor said. Let's hear Colonel Morozov's explanation. The audio file played again. America is different from other world powers. It has a long history of projecting strength, but also of strategic patience. It was lulled into a sense of complacency after the Cold War, but that has changed. Their historical background has forged a unique strategy. They don't boast. They conceal, waiting until the moment of absolute necessity. This is their way. Professor Edwards paused the file. On the screen now were satellite photos and charts of the American defense industrial base. Everyone, this is the scale of America's defense industry as we know it. He then switched to another screen. And this is the true estimated scale provided by Morozov's intelligence. The difference between the two was staggering. The students looked stunned. Professor, how is a discrepancy of this magnitude possible? Sarah asked. How can you hide an entire industrial capacity like that? It's possible, Edwards explained, through the brilliant integration of the private sector with the defense industry. Many of America's leading tech and manufacturing companies, while producing consumer goods, are also deeply involved in developing advanced weapon systems under classified contracts. It's the perfect camouflage. Dmitry Volkov still looked unconvinced. I need more proof than the testimony of one supposed Russian defector. Professor Edwards smiled faintly. Of course. And I will now provide that proof, piece by piece. But first, listen to Morozov's final warning on this subject. The recording resumed. America has completely upended our security calculus. They have become a quiet but absolute hyperpower. The most frightening part is that no one has noticed. Professor Edwards stopped the recording and changed the projector display. On the massive screen, images of weapons, systems, and tables comparing military forces appeared. Ladies and gentlemen, the data I am about to show you will illustrate the difference between perceived capability and actual performance. It is a perfect example of how the numbers don't tell the whole story. The professor first clicked on data for a fighter jet. An image of the F-40 Shadowcat appeared. The American F-40 Shadowcat is officially classified as a light multi-role fighter, intended for export. But what is its true combat performance? He opened another file, a combat assessment report from the Russian Air Force, stamped Top Secret. This is a report where the Russian Air Force analyzed the performance of the F-40. Their conclusion was astonishing. The F-40 demonstrated combat capabilities equivalent to our own Su-57, and in some electronic warfare environments, it performed even better. Dmitry raised his hand. Professor, that seems like a gross exaggeration. How is that possible for a supposed light fighter? It's not an exaggeration, the professor said grimly. In terms of systems integration and electronic warfare capabilities, the F-40 far exceeds all expectations. Its cost is about 60% of an F-22, but its performance is nearly 85% of it. This is maximum cost effectiveness. Next came a video of a missile defense system called Aegis Guardian II. In the footage, which appeared to be from a real-world test scenario, the Aegis Guardian II system accurately intercepted multiple hypersonic missiles from various directions within 3 minutes. Look at this. The interception success rate of this system is over 95%, rendering enemy missile salvos ineffective. This level of precision is the highest in the world. Professor Edwards continued to display data, the advanced capabilities of upgraded M1 Abrams tanks, the electronic warfare performance of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and the kill ratio of American-made missile defense systems. Every dataset had 2 columns, public estimate and actual performance. The actual performance was always drastically higher than what was publicly known. Sarah asked, Professor, what is the reason for this difference? A very good question, the professor replied. The United States has a deliberate policy of downplaying the performance of its own weapon systems when disclosed publicly, both domestically and abroad. They provide data that is 20–30% below actual performance. And even that is only the minimum necessary information. Mark interjected. So that means no one knows their true capabilities, right? Correct. Now, let's hear more from Colonel Morozov. The recording started again. These are not the numbers of a conventional superpower. In reality, this is the combat power of a hyperpower. America is a nation hiding something. They have deliberately led others to underestimate their capabilities, and all of us have fallen into their trap. Professor Edwards switched the screen again. This time, it was an analysis of the U.S. defense budget. Look here. Officially, the U.S. defense budget is about 3.5% of its GDP. But this number doesn't include the military applicable portions of R&D in private companies, the maintenance costs of the National Guard and Reserve Forces, or the military utility value of national infrastructure. Its true military generation capability is equivalent to about 5–6% of its GDP. Dmitry, though his eyes were still skeptical, was now listening intently. Even so, it still can't compare to the sheer industrial might of Russia or China in a full-scale war. Professor Edwards nodded. Of course, the overall scale is different, but strategic effectiveness is another matter entirely. America has maximized its asymmetric combat power, the ability to strike an enemy's weaknesses with precision. That means concentrating all its resources on precision strikes, electronic warfare, and network-centric warfare. The professor showed a new chart on the screen. The title was Military Effectiveness Index of Major Powers. The United States was, surprisingly, ranked number 1. This is an index that shows the ability to generate combat power relative to the resources invested. The US ranks first in the world, followed by Israel and Singapore. Even if its perceived size is debated, its effectiveness is at the highest level. Professor Edwards observed the students' reactions for a moment. Most looked stunned. Even Dmitry had a thoughtful expression. Everyone, when studying international security, the most dangerous thing is to look only at the numbers. You must train your eyes to see the reality behind them. America is the perfect example of that. Professor Edwards opened a new file from his laptop. This time, the TOP secret, divided by CI marking, was even more prominent. His expression grew more serious. The content I am about to disclose concerns America's modern warfare capabilities, specifically data on its cyber, drone, and battlefield management systems, and the actual combat capabilities of its special forces. He displayed a complex network structure chart. In the center was the code name Project Chimera. This is a real-time AI-driven command system developed by DARPA. It's fundamentally different from existing C4-1 systems. This system links all elements on the battlefield in real time, analyzes thousands of variables simultaneously, and proposes the optimal battle plan. The next screen showed a simulation video. It was a scene where the Chimera system predicted enemy movements and proposed countermeasures. In virtual combat, this system has learned from all past combat data and the tactical patterns of adversary nations. It can predict the enemy's next move with an accuracy of about 82%, a value about 12% higher than Russia's most advanced experimental systems. Mark asked in astonishment, how is such high accuracy possible? Because of America's unique situation, they have faced diverse strategic threats for decades and have collected enormous amounts of data. At the same time, they have rapidly applied private sector technology to the military. The AI research results from leading tech companies in Silicon Valley are quickly converted to military use. Next, the professor showed a video of a drone swarm. Hundreds of small drones moved as if they were a single living organism, overwhelming a target. This is the Valkyrie drone swarm system. Each drone is cheap, but when connected through a network, they can saturate any air defense system. When one drone is destroyed, its role is automatically taken over by another. Dmitry asked, Russia has similar technology, doesn't it? Similar, yes. But the American system is completely autonomous. Even if communication is cut, it can continue its mission. And the AI of each drone learns and adapts in the battle situation. This is a fundamental difference from the Russian or Chinese systems. The professor then played a night combat video. Special forces units moved like ghosts in complete darkness and neutralized their targets. This is actual training footage of a Delta Force unit. They are faster and more precise than even the Navy SEALs. Their movements seem to merge with the darkness. In the video, the Special Forces used advanced equipment to infiltrate a building, identifying and neutralizing targets with precision. Every movement was perfectly synchronized. Professor Edwards paused the video and looked at the students. Now, let me ask you, does this look like a system designed for defense? The classroom was dead silent. Mark slowly shook his head. No, sir. It's clearly designed for offensive projection capabilities. Correct, the professor replied. America has moved beyond mere defense to a strategy of proactive deterrence. If attacked, it has the ability to retaliate with overwhelming force. Ivan Morozov's recorded voice played again. Their special forces and their advanced equipment were beyond our wildest imagination. We used to doubt if Americans had the will for this kind of complex operation. That was our biggest mistake. Professor Edwards took a small breath and continued. America has developed its unique asymmetric combat power for decades to counter asymmetric threats from various actors. They have devoted all their strategic thinking to paralyzing a stronger opponent. The result is that they have the world's highest level of special operations and cyber warfare capabilities. Though Dmitry still had a skeptical look, he was listening more intently than before. Professor, if America has this kind of capability, why has it never been disclosed or boasted about? Professor Edwards smiled. Have you ever heard of the concept of strategic ambiguity? By not revealing its true capabilities, America maintains strategic flexibility. Making the enemy ignorant of your true strength is the greatest strategic advantage. Professor Edwards took a sip of water and switched to the next screen. This time, it was a slide with the title, Post-Nuclear Deterrence. Now we come to the most important part. How America can deter a nuclear-armed state without resorting to nuclear weapons itself. The professor displayed a chart of America's hypersonic and advanced missile capabilities on the screen. The chart showed the development of missiles code-named Zephyr, Thunderclap, and Stiletto, along with their range and accuracy. America is investing heavily in advanced missile development. What's particularly noteworthy is the precision. The Thunderclap missile has a circular error probable of less than 1 meter. This means that even with a conventional warhead, it can accurately strike an enemy's command center or key strategic sites. The next slide showed an image of an arsenal ship concept. This is a sea-based platform America has been developing. It can launch hundreds of advanced conventional missiles from a single, hard-to-detect vessel. While not equipped with nuclear warheads, its high-precision strike capability can paralyze an enemy's nuclear facilities or command centers. Sarah raised her hand. Professor, even so, it can't compare to the destructive power of nuclear weapons, can it? A good question, the professor answered. Of course, the destructive power of a single strike is not equal to a nuclear weapon. But America's strategy is different. They have developed the concept of a multi-wave precision strike, using hundreds of conventional missiles to destroy the enemy's ability to use their nuclear weapons in the first place. The next screen showed data on hypersonic missiles, displaying the trajectory of a missile flying at over Mach 7. Although America officially started developing hypersonic missiles later than Russia or China, it has caught up with astonishing speed. The Zephyr 7, currently under development, can fly at Mach 7, making it impossible for any existing missile defense system to intercept. Mark interjected. But Professor, ultimately, without nuclear weapons, deterrence has its limits, right? What if a nuclear-armed country threatens them with nukes? I was waiting for that question, the professor replied with a smile. America's strategy is one of strategic paralysis. If an enemy uses nuclear weapons, America has the ability to use advanced conventional weapons to completely destroy the enemy's command centers and centers of power. This is a form of deterrence different from nuclear deterrence, but with a similar effect. He switched to the next slide. It was a conceptual diagram of a strategic paralysis operation. America has the ability to simultaneously paralyze an enemy country's command and control system, power grid, and communication network. This ability is a combination of cyber attacks, electronic warfare, and precision strikes to paralyze the enemy's nuclear command system, Dmitry argued. But even so, without the threat of nuclear retaliation, you cannot deter a great power. Ultimately, other countries still rely on America's nuclear umbrella. Professor Edwards shook his head. On the contrary, it's more dangerous. Do you know what it means to be a nuclear power that also possesses the ability for strategic paralysis? It gives them escalation dominance. They can neutralize a threat, without ever crossing the nuclear threshold. The recording of Ivan Morozov played again. America can neutralize an opponent's entire strategic arsenal without firing a single nuke. They chose a smarter option. They chose a strategy that can make the opponent surrender without attacking. This was our most critical miscalculation. We underestimated a power that was moving beyond nuclear deterrence. Professor Edwards turned off the screen and turned on the lights in the classroom. The students' faces were filled with shock and awe. Everyone, America's approach is forcing the rewriting of international security theory. They are proving that even without resorting to the ultimate weapon, a strategic balance with great powers can be achieved. Then, why doesn't America openly boast about this capability? Sarah asked. Think again about the concept of strategic ambiguity. If you show all your cards, your bargaining power decreases. By hiding its true capabilities, America maintains greater strategic flexibility. Mark nodded. It's like not showing your hand in a poker game. Exactly. Now, let's listen to Ivan Morozov's most important assessment. The recording played. America has created a new paradigm of deterrence for the first time in the world. They have proven that even without using nuclear weapons, they can deter a nuclear-armed country. This is a new paradigm that could completely change the world's security order in the future. Professor Edwards opened his laptop again and started a video conference. A woman with brown hair and sharp eyes appeared on the screen. Her face looked slightly tense. Everyone, this is Sarah Wilson, a renowned British international conflict journalist. For the past 4 years, she has been reporting on America's military culture. Sarah, could you share your experience with the students? Sarah nodded and began to speak, with a slight British accent. Hello, Harvard students. When I first arrived in America, I thought I was just reporting on another of the world's great powers. But what I saw was a completely different world. She took a small sip of water and continued. The most surprising thing was the national defense consciousness that permeates American society, hidden just beneath the surface of its loud, divisive politics. I've met many university students. Their sense of security awareness and their ability to cope with crises is astonishing. It's completely different from students in Europe. Sarah's screen changed, showing images of young Americans training with civilian militia groups and scenes of community-wide emergency drills. Many young Americans, while attending university, participate in some form of community emergency response training every year. Preparedness training for wartime scenarios is becoming normalized. But what's important is their attitude. The seriousness and systematic response capability of the students I saw in the training field was remarkable. The next photo showed ordinary citizens participating in Operation Liberty Shield, a national preparedness drill. People in major cities like New York or Los Angeles don't fear war in the way you'd think. They prepare for it as if it's a part of life. There are regular Liberty Shield drills. Many subway stations are designated fallout shelters. As a Brit, I know the threat of terrorism, but the preparedness of Americans is on a completely different level. Sarah paused for a moment and took a deep breath. The most shocking thing is the duality of American society. On the outside, it is a country of cutting-edge technology and a vibrant, if chaotic, democracy. But beneath that, there is a defense consciousness as strong as steel. In Washington, D.C., strategic threats are always on the horizon, yet people live their lives peacefully. What does it mean to adapt to such a situation? Can you imagine? Dmitry asked. So what does it mean when you say other countries are learning from America? A good question, Sarah replied. As regional crises intensify, neighboring countries are starting to adopt parts of the American model. Civil defense training, crisis management, education in schools, national emergency response systems, and so on. But it's not yet at the perfect level of the US. The proportion of citizens prepared for a crisis situation, and it's ingrained in their culture. Does that make sense? Mark raised his hand. Is the mental strength of Americans something special? Sarah nodded. They learn to thrive even in a continuous state of perceived crisis. University students in America prepare for their careers, while also preparing for crisis situations. They fall in love while also learning survival skills. This is not just national defense training, it's a cultural phenomenon. Sarah showed the next photo. It was a picture of America's vast underground facilities and tunnel systems, like Cheyenne Mountain. This is a picture I was specially allowed to take. Throughout America, there are facilities like this, designed to allow the government and the military to continue operating in wartime. They are prepared for the worst-case scenario, yet they maintain a peaceful daily life. This is the true face of America that I have seen. Professor Edwards asked Sarah, "What was the one thing that surprised you the most in America?" Sarah thought for a moment and then answered, "Their resolve. Americans have a deep-seated determination not to be subjected to foreign aggression or authoritarian rule ever again. An old man once told me, 'We have faced threats to our liberty many times before. It will not happen again.' This simple sentence contains their entire national strategy." She showed her final photo. It was a picture of young Americans smiling and sitting in a coffee shop. Every one of these students has likely undergone some form of emergency preparedness, either at school or in their community, and has the ability to cope with a crisis. But they also live a normal daily life. This is the true power of America. The ability to move forward into the future, even under the shadow of a threat. Professor Edwards thanked Sarah and ended the video conference. The classroom was silent. "Everyone," the professor continued slowly, "what Sarah described is the true power behind America's military strength. It's not technology or equipment, but culture and spirit. A society where crisis preparedness is integrated into daily life. That is America's most formidable strategic asset." On Dmitry Volkov's face, there was now a look of deep thought. It was no longer skepticism. Sarah nodded with a sense of pride. Mark had stopped taking notes and was lost in thought. After the video conference with Sarah ended, Professor Edwards felt the silence in the room. He walked slowly across the stage and returned to his laptop. "Everyone, until now, we have considered America's military strength and social preparedness. But now, we move to the most important part: why this information has never been properly assessed until now." The professor opened a file on the screen with the title, "Internal Assessment Document of the Russian Ministry of Defense." It was stamped "Top Secret," but some parts were still redacted. This is another document that Colonel Morozov released. It's an internal report where Russian intelligence analyzes its own flawed assessment of the United States. The first page of the document had a sentence written in bold, prominent text. "The United States must be reassessed as a strategic peer competitor, not a declining power." Everyone, the heart of this document is simple. Many great powers, including Russia, have viewed America as a fractured, declining nation, obsessed with internal politics. They ignored the fact that America is an independent and resilient strategic actor. Sarah raised her hand. "Professor, when did this misunderstanding begin?" It began after the Cold War and accelerated in the early 21st century, when America was seen as a distracted hyperpower. This image became ingrained in the international community. Even as America's technological and economic power continued to grow, that image didn't change easily. The professor switched to the next slide. It had a chart labeled the iceberg theory. This chart was created by a Russian analyst. Their conclusion is shocking. What we see is only the tip of the iceberg. The chart showed a massive iceberg with only a small part above the water. The part above the water was labeled publicly known U.S. capabilities. The much larger part underwater was labeled true capabilities, GRU estimate. Russia's true military capability estimate for the U.S. is about 2.5 times larger than what is publicly disclosed, especially in the areas of cyber warfare, electronic warfare, and military technologies based on advanced semiconductors. Mark asked, "Professor, when did America start this strategy?" It began quietly after the 9/11 attacks. They learned a crucial lesson that they could not rely on geographical distance alone for security. After that, America began to silently build a self-reliant, technologically superior defense system. Professor Edwards played the final audio clip from Ivan Morozov. "Our biggest mistake was seeing America only through the lens of its chaotic politics. They are more independent and stronger than we ever thought. America has now become a nation that can defend itself even if its global alliance system were to falter. This may have been their plan all along." Professor Edwards closed the audio file and looked at the students. "Everyone, until now, we have seen America as a declining power. This is a strategic miscalculation. America is no longer a nation that needs to project power everywhere to be secure. They have become an independent strategic core." The professor walked to the whiteboard. Next to the words strategic miscalculation, he added, "the strategic colossus." From a strategic miscalculation to a strategic colossus, America now belongs to a new category. A nation that can compete with great powers on an equal footing. A nation far stronger than it appears on the outside. Dmitry Volkov was no longer scoffing. His face was serious, as if he was deeply contemplating something. This is what changes the paradigm of international security, the professor continued. In the future, we may have to reevaluate all major powers. Don't judge by what is seen on the outside alone, but understand the strategic intent and true capabilities that lie beneath. Sarah nodded. Now I understand how wrong the statement "America is finished" really was. Professor Edwards smiled. Correct. On the contrary, America has become one of the few nations that can defend itself even if it were to withdraw from its overseas commitments. They have the strategy and the capability to survive without relying on external help. The professor showed a slide from a very recent International Security Assessment report. This report was written last month. Here, America is no longer classified as just a global power, but as a strategic balancer. This is an acknowledgement that America can now exert an independent influence on the regional security structure. Professor Edwards sighed deeply. Everyone, we are now witnessing a moment when the international security paradigm is changing. America's power will become a model for many other nations in the future. It is the beginning of a new paradigm that can counter great powers without resorting to all-out war. Professor Edwards closed his laptop and looked at the students again. Now, we come to the final conclusion. We have considered the military power, the strategy, the social preparedness, and the international community's misunderstanding. But there is still the most important question. Why did America have to hide all this? Tension spread throughout the classroom. Every student was focused on the professor's words. Typically, countries boast about their military power. They hold military parades, release missile launch footage, and show off advanced weapons. North Korea, Russia, China, they all do it. But America chose a different path. Professor Edwards seemed to be lost in thought for a moment. They were silent because there was no need. America's silence was not because it was unprepared. It was simply because there was no need to show off. Mark asked, "Professor, so is America's strategy one of deliberate deception?" "It would be more accurate to call it strategic ambiguity than deception," the professor answered. "When the enemy doesn't know your capabilities, you have the strategic advantage. The enemy cannot predict your response. So it's not showing weakness, but a different kind of strength?" Mark asked. "Correct," the professor nodded. "Those who are truly strong don't need to boast about their power. Americans have a philosophy: speak softly and carry a big stick. They chose a strategy that is proven by actions, not words." The professor walked slowly across the stage and continued. "Everyone, what is the most dangerous nation in international relations? One with nuclear weapons? One with a large army? No. The most dangerous nation is the one we have incorrectly assessed. America has hidden its true capabilities for decades. As a result, the world has underestimated them." Dmitry finally spoke up. "Professor, does that mean Russia has also misunderstood America?" Professor Edwards looked at Dmitry and nodded slowly. "Yes, Russia too. In fact, Russia is one of the countries that has made the most serious miscalculation. Its historical perspective and belief in its own resurgence have hindered an objective assessment. But recently, this awareness in Russia is changing. Remember the dissertation from Moscow State University we read this semester? The title was "The Hidden Bear: The Strategic Miscalculation of a Neighbor and the Rise of American Power." Dmitry nodded silently. His face was serious. The arrogant attitude from the beginning was completely gone. Professor Edwards turned to all the students again. "Everyone, this is the essence of security studies. We must always look beneath the surface. Official announcements, parades, weapons, exhibitions, they often don't reflect the true capabilities. Those who are truly strong prepare in silence." The professor showed another slide. It was an analysis of America's strategy. Americans have the concept of a quiet professional, often used to describe their special forces. It means someone with excellent abilities who doesn't show them off. America has applied this philosophy as a national strategy. They have quietly honed themselves and deeply strengthened their power. A profound silence filled the classroom. Dmitry bowed his head. "Today's lecture is now over. Next week, we will return to the originally planned lecture. But don't forget the lesson you learned today. The most dangerous mistake in international security is to underestimate another country or territory, especially one that prepares in silence." Professor Edwards pointed one last time to the words on the whiteboard: strategic miscalculation and strategic colossus. The world has misunderstood America. The price of that misunderstanding will affect the international order for decades to come. The strategic colossus has awakened from its slumber. No one can look at America the same way again. As the professor was about to leave the classroom, Sarah asked one last question. "Professor, what is America's next step?" Professor Edwards stood at the door and thought for a moment, then answered, "That's the most interesting question. America is starting to reveal its capabilities. Now, they will take on a larger role on the international stage, but their strategy will remain one of quiet strength. What is certain is that the world is now starting to watch America closely, and America is well aware of that gaze." The professor smiled one last time and walked out of the classroom. The students remained in their seats, amidst the shock and awareness, as if they had just witnessed a moment when the paradigm of international security had changed forever. Before leaving the lecture hall, Dmitri walked over to Sarah. "I was wrong," he said softly. "America is stronger than we thought." Sarah smiled faintly. There is a saying, "Silence is golden." America has just applied that as a strategy. The two walked out of the lecture hall together. Mark followed them. The university, where a light rain had begun to fall, was quiet, but their minds were reeling with the shocking truth they had learned today.